James True here. I'm assuming you can hear my voice. We're about to get started here. A little bit of technical difficulties this morning, but we're happy to do a reset. Time to flip that circuit. Good morning. Good morning. I am John the Baptist here today, and if you don't know, you probably know what that means. Maybe you don't. Dude was kind of unkempt, right? He was kind of sloppy in certain ways. And if you guys can hear my audio, it'd be great to let me know. I bet someone just did, hopefully. Great, can you hear me? Last night, for some of you today, at 11:30 last night for me, the solstice began a big shift, as you're about to see. And I don't know how many of you knew that the solstice was John the Baptist's birthday, or the celebrated. Thank you, Melanie. The celebrated birthday, and we're gonna talk about it today because it's pretty profound. If you don't know John the Baptist, there's some few hallmarks to this. One of which is John was a little bit on the eccentric side. He would be what you would call a truther maybe 5 years ago. Like you could equate him with like a legit Alex Jones. I'm using legit here because you're about to see as we dive into this topic, fanaticism is its own form of truth. And John the Baptist was really, 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 really serious about truth. The same way you were last summer, the same way you are right now, the same way you've been all winter, all through COVID, that each of us have been this John the Baptist type icon. Matthew 3:4. John wore clothes made of camel's hair. He had a leather strap around his waist and ate grasshoppers and wild honey. Certainly some will dispute that, claiming it wasn't grasshoppers, those were very good. He was eating something even worse. And that is exactly the proof that I have for you today about the story of John the Baptist. The scaffolding and the solstice of John the Baptist. This is a scaffolding archetypal figure. When I say scaffolding, I mean behind the scenes, behind the set, behind the stage, behind the curtain, there is a intricate system of scaffolding holding the sets in place, holding the entire show together. And that scaffolding is it's winking at you. It's winking at you all the time. And we are in an age where we were brought, we were delivered, we were chosen as the avatar of our DNA line to be on the forefront of that. Your entire adrenal system is here to witness this rapture, and you've been witnessing it. You've been witnessing it this whole time. This 11:11 mitosis in society. Which side do you drink from? Where is the nectar of your baptism? The solstice is a big deal. It was so big of a deal that a human figure emerged out of the scaffolding. You could say that he was wrung. You could say he was breathed into the clay. You could say that your belief itself shaped him out of the very ether. It doesn't matter, because syncretism shows you that there's more than one truth. And the solstice is the birthday, the celebration of John the Baptist. And this was a man who suffered for the truth. I baptized you with water for repentance, but after me comes one who is more powerful than I, says Matthew 3:11. John the Baptist is telling you, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, but the Lamb is. The one who comes is. And that I am only the pointer to it. This is key. I am the pointer to the Lamb. And John's ego was based on self-deprecation. His faith, his dedication was based on how much conviction he could pull from the crowd. That there is a technology of conviction, and it's been here since day one, and that you will measure someone's truth by the amount of conviction you feel secreted from them. And that conviction is a sound. That conviction is a frequency. Some of you are aware that that conviction is a smell, because smell itself is a nuclear conviction that's flying around the ether, that the power of something is so strong you can charge the freaking ether with your conviction. And what causes us to believe in things is not truth so much as that feeling we get being close to someone's conviction. That the person who has conviction is providing an umbrella for you in the shittiest of times. And that conviction doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be good news. None of those are required for you to find comfort. That's why I've been saying for so long, because it's something that I learned so hard, that the truth movement itself, the same movement John Baptist was on, has always been a comfort movement. And that's not a bad thing. It's not. It's showing you the entire reason why you're here. It's showing you the entire technology behind conviction and self-deprecation. And we look around today. This Saturday was Juneteenth, a new holiday, a completely fabricated corporate holiday based around suffering, based around the sainthood of suffering. There are 44 verses in the Bible referencing sackcloth and 6 referencing covering oneself in ashes. There's an entire cult. When I say cult, there's an entire system of belief out there, is a better way to put it, who will take the ashes of their family and mourn by covering themselves in them. To tar and feather thyself is a form of conviction. Colossians 1:24, in my flesh I complete what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is the church. 1 Corinthians 9:2-7, I chastise my body and bring it into subjection, lest perhaps when I have preached to others, I myself should be cast away. And that through the history of worship, through the known history of worship, I should say, man has secreted conviction from himself, secreted truth from himself. The messianic movement is the secretion of truth through pain. Jesus on the cross could not be a clearer symbol of that. I don't want to hear you argue with me about it. The suffering is the secretion. The suffering is the liberation and the truth. And why is it true? Not because it's true, although it could be. I'm not saying it's not, but listen to me. Why is it true? Because of the power of the conviction. Simple thermodynamic magical equation. Who of us is willing to die for the belief that one of us is evil and the other is good? That is a standard argument on the battlefield in every war. And who wins that battle every time is the man with more conviction. Not who's right. At no point does the universe stop and say, well, wait a minute. Look, that's a Nazi over there, and we can't have him shoot you because you're you're an American and you're the good guy. You're so good and he's so bad. So I'm going to change the space-time continuum here and make that bullet turn around and go back to from whence it came. Out, damn spot, right? Because your truth, it doesn't work that way. It's conviction. And conviction is such a deeper form of truth that your neocortex can never touch it. Ever, ever, ever can get to the heart of where your conviction is. And it's okay. Please don't argue with me about this because you're arguing with your own reptile. You're arguing with that center portion of your brain that simply lives in a system where survival is truth. That's all. And this is not about how evil you are. In fact, it's the opposite, because to survive is to be good. We can talk about that word later. But to survive is to be good. That system, that law has been in nature from day one. And none of you are going to tell me that flowers are evil. None of you are going to tell me that whales are somehow immoral. Morality is a frequency, and it resounds its way from the very bottom to the very top. And as you gain and lose electricity, your morality changes too. And the only thing, no matter where you are on that spectrum, if you're all the way down here where everyone's calling you a narcissist because you have no electricity, if you're all the way up here where everyone's calling you a saint because you have so much electricity, the truth will only come not from your truthiness, but from your conviction. And that conviction is about sacrifice. And the Kabbalists knew that. John the Baptist knew that. You're dealing with a time, a pre-Roman time, where people did not have jobs. Everyone was self-employed, and they were employed in the business of survival. And that business of survival does not involve truth. It involves something much more expensive than that. Psalm 35:13. Ego altum, cum mihi molesti essant in dubar silicio. I'm sure I bastardized that. It's the first mention of the silicio. Silicio is basically a device that's used to bring pain to the individual. And that pain is supposed to be a reminder of their sacrifice, of their purpose. But deep down, that pain is something deeper. Deep down, that pain is proof of conviction. And it's constantly paying into the trauma technology. These are examples of hair shirts used throughout the world, throughout history, in fact. John the Baptist would have worn something like this, made out of camel hair turned inside out. The flailing, the flatulation, all of these are placing ourselves on the same cross to secrete the same kind of conviction. And this conviction is not words. This conviction is so much more expensive than tongue. In the story of Elijah, and they cried out and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation, and there was no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention. 1 Kings 18. Elijah, in that story, was showing you the history of the time. That the worshipers, in this case it was Baal Moloch, that the worshipers of Baal Moloch would utilize self-cutting as part of their belief. That by showing their conviction to God, they cause him to act in the world. It's the Ashura festival. It's the same rituals. proof of conviction, and it's also a much deeper prana economy. I'd like for you to notice that the person on the right is probably pretty focused on the person on the left. And that the person on the left is helping the person on the right beat himself even more. It's a frequency. This man in the center, covered in blood, has found a frequency that emits conviction. And it's so powerful, a circle, a human circle, has formed organically around him. And he is king. He has crowned himself king. And he's earned it because he believes that he's entitled to it. And what gave him that entitlement? Was it because he woke up that morning and thought, I'm just a good guy? Or was it because he was willing to demonstrate his conviction before a witness, and that witness was willing to pay him by their belief too? St. Bartholomew was skinned alive and beheaded. He's often depicted holding a flailed skin or the curved flensing knife with which he was skinned. He's called the patron saint of leather makers. He was sainted for flailing his own skin off. Our old friend Ezekiel, poor guy, really wanted conviction, was willing to take conviction farther than John the Baptist, farther than anybody. Ezekiel 4:12, "Eat the food as you would a loaf of barley bread, says Lord. Bake it in the sight of the people, using human excrement for fuel." Ezekiel appeals to the Lord. Lord, I don't want to eat bread cooked on human poop. I've been a vegetarian my whole life. I've lived a clean life. I've never diddled myself. Never stolen or spoken your name in vain. Is there anything you can do? And the Lord shows his compassion on Ezekiel and says, "Very well, I will let you bake your bread over cow dung instead of human excrement, says Lord." Ezekiel 4:15. Ezekiel is so deep in his conviction. He is so deep in that technology that even he is not able to set his sights on the golden prize of bread cooked by human excrement. And he would have to give himself a break, but only through divine providence, and eat that over cow dung instead. This is technology, guys. And this technology was rampant on the land. That what you consider companies competing right now, what you consider a gold label record, what you consider a top 10 video, you're looking at the same technology and conviction, in worship and conviction, that people were sold on which saint had more conviction. Ezekiel was competing. This is the Lance Armstrong of Rome. Each of them were competing, and each of them were willing to take it as far as it needed to go. The Magdaramay festival in the Philippines. This still goes on today. If you're wondering about the blindfold, I think that has to do with martyring. I think people are realizing that when they're beating themselves in public and people can see you, people can recognize you, that you're not martyring yourself, you're pulling sympathy. These are very, very different things. And so you'll see that a lot of these rituals involve hiding the face. See? Why? Because as I just explained, this guy is king. This has nothing to do with the Lord, because the prana economy gives him all the credit. His face is the sigil that gets the charge. His story gets the charge, St. Bartholomew. His details get the charge. Well, shit, he must be right, because look, he had this whole conversation with God about it. And even these people are still recognized in their town. People know who this is. A severe beating can knock all the evil out of you, Proverbs 20:30. 2 Samuel 3:31, show your sorrow by tearing your clothes and wearing sackcloth. The Shiite Muslims, very, very, very serious children of Abraham. Yep. Have this same ritual. The flagellation done in public breeds trauma. It's a trauma bonding event with tribe. And that tribe shows you who you can trust, believe it or not. These are good events. They're the same events we have. Right now, a corporate ritual flagellation is you're going to have to get a vaccine. If you want to participate, if you want to keep working, if you want to run with the big boys, you can't be coming in here saying you were afraid of a vaccine. It doesn't take much for a simple electricity. It doesn't take much to influence. And the truth is, the Lord's been using the same thing. That the Lord technology of the Old Testament was capitalizing on this type of mutilation. Saul replied, say to David, the king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies. That the same techniques that you saw in the Pied Piper of War, where they're telling people, hey man, if you go ahead and enlist now, at least you'll get a bonus. The same things were being done way back then with circumcision. That people were voluntarily doing something to prevent, just like a vaccine, to prevent something from happening in the future. It's all based on belief. All of it is based on belief. The Old Testament made circumcision a trauma monopoly. When I say monopoly, I want you to notice that Genesis 17, every male among you shall be circumcised. It will be the sign of the covenant between you and God. But in the exact same books, in the exact same scripture, do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. Leviticus 19:28. And Ezekiel 44. After the chapters of burning your own bread on human excrement, no foreigners uncircumcised in heart and flesh is to enter my sanctuary. It's requiring the very same circumcision that he forbids. Like so many apostles back then, like so many saints, like so many people trying to survive in Rome, masochism was self-employment. Masochism was something that you could participate in. It was something that society itself pushed on you. Victim psychology erupted from salvation. Victim psychology is the slow secretion of all of us still wanting to secrete truth. And we will secrete that by the subtlest of victimhood. The word martyr never meant dead person for God. Martyr used to mean witness, testimony. At first, that term applied to the apostles. But it turned out that so many people liked the fact that the apostles were suffering, that they began to use that word too. That martyr became commonplace, became normalized. And what do you see right now? The same things. And then they put a threshold on it. They said, all right, from now on, unless you died, you can't be a martyr. Doesn't matter how much you suffer, you have to die. And the eugenics program began. Martyrdom has 2 ingredients. 2. Requires suffering and it requires witness. I'm going to play this because I want you to see that it's the exact same screams, it's the exact same calls, it's the exact same cries, but they could only be done in the city of Rome for it to work. That this is an antenna, this is a collector, this is a spine collecting things by showcasing suffering. This is the Ashura festival, but for pansies, like this. This, but for women. Did you know this person's from Russia? This person doesn't even live in America. But they had the camera. They had the witness. They had the collector and the opportunity to martyr. And I'm not saying this is wrong. I wish that we would stop pretending that we can know shit and that we just understand how belief works. Because it's belief drives every industry, not science. It's belief. Belief drives every government, every war, every politic. We're all pretending, well, it's because we don't know shit. No, we know plenty. What we don't admit is how much belief affects us. Is how important belief is. And instead of denying that, why don't we start saying, hey, maybe that's more important than it should be. Maybe we should stop considering this false notion of gnosis. Because every frequency has a different belief, because every frequency has a different place where one can gather to find comfort. And we seek comfort as much as we seek truth. What do you think causes the sine wave of your life? It's your constant struggle between which one you like more. Do I want to be comfortable or do I want the truth? Do I want to be comfortable or do I want the truth? And that's the whole reason that keeps you moving. And movement is life. It's the verb. It's the sine wave. Saint Ludwig of Ashes. Not only is this the dirtiest man in Europe who made the news a few years ago, but he's the most famous. He became a popular tourist destination until he finally died. He kept an internal fire burning in his house so he could lay in the ashes all the time. It gave him comfort. And why did it give him comfort? Because so many witnessed him. So many people witnessed him. It secreted the conviction necessary to allow him to survive. Martyrs are measured in witness. This witness is measured in amps. Greta has 4.9 million amps. Hogboy has 1.1 million amps. These are the same martyrs that we had back then. It's the exact same technology. Even the covering of the ashes. These are actually actors. Extinction Rebellion is a hired acting coalition. It's a coalition of SAG actors that are professional activists. And if you look at the one on the right, you see this woman's happy. This brings her joy. Pretending to be covered in ashes, having all these pictures taken of her, is good to her. It's a collection in her. And the background here is September 11th. Those people aren't happy. those people are secreting more conviction because they're authentic. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, I like to call them the Sadducees, they saw this entire thing happening. They saw the fanaticism running rampant. These were the protectors of the book of Moses. They were constantly saying, don't be worshiping no false idols, you dumbasses, stop doing that. Stop doing that. Don't make any images. Don't do this. Don't do that. Cut your dick off, though, but don't do anything else. Don't cut your tattoos. Don't do anything else except for trim the tip of your dick. An entire economy was born with the price of sainthood. Andrew was tied to a tree and scourged. Agnes was brotheled. Yes, brotheled. Sent to a brothel. Whored out, burned, sword in the throat. Bartholomew, skinned alive. Catherine, broken on the wheel, burnt. Clement, tied to anchor, cast in the sea. Dimphna, beheaded by her own father. Julia, tortured in 13 ways. Hippolytus, torn apart by wild horses. Ouch. Ignatius, eaten by lions. James, stoned, clubbed. I don't mean stoned and clubbed in the good ways. Jesus, humiliated, tortured, crucified. Jerome, flailed. John, scalped and eaten alive. Lawrence, roasted alive. Matthias, burned alive. Matthew, martyred, stabbed. Paul, martyred, beheaded. Peter, crucified upside down, then cut in half. Philip, crucified. Focus, thrown into kiln, boiled alive. Symphorosa, children murdered in front of her, then drowned. Thomas, martyred by 4 spears. Victor, ground to death in a stone mill. The price of sainthood is, of course, death, but it's also the deepest form of suffering. Why? Because that suffering can be credited as conviction and truth. That's why. That's why. And that all those things are equated as truth because of the amount of suffering that endured. I had to say all these things because, let's see if he gets it. Yeah, good job, buddy. I had to say all these things because I'm about to tell you about baptism. But before I tell you about baptism, I really need you to picture perfectly the kind of world that existed then, that the cooking of excrement, that the public displays. Right now, sometimes you will see someone on the interstate with a sign telling you that they're homeless. And that I want you to picture that was built into the population, but it was a professional sport. That even sophistry itself came out of that same pool, but that was an industry. It was an industry. It was such an industry that the stories of demons that Jesus tells you in the Bible are literally the stories of him watching someone possessed by this industry of victimhood, of martyrdom. And that people were so intensely looking for a way out that they were willing to flail their own skin. They were willing to shove spears under their fingernails. They were willing to circumcise themselves in an alleyway to prove their manhood. They were willing to take it as far as it needed to go so they could survive. And then John the Baptist didn't stop with putting a hair shirt on. Not only that, John the Baptist was popular. That the Pharisees and the Sadducees were watching him. They would ask him questions. They would go to him. He wouldn't come to them. They would go to him because of the conviction that this guy had going. And if you're going to tell me that that much conviction can come from a simple hair shirt turned inside out, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. I'm going to tell you that John had a medicine that was much more intense than flailing, much more intense than a hair shirt. John had the technology of drowning. Waterboarding is a simulated drowning in a controlled environment. The individual is mobilized on his or her back, inclined downward. A cloth is placed over the individual's mouth. Water is poured over the face. The water poured over the subject's face forces the imposition of water into the lungs, eliciting a gag reflex. The subject believes they are drowning and the death is imminent. Believes they are drowning. Numerous experts have described this technique as torture. The method reportedly causes mental distress without causing lasting physical damage to the subject. Mouth and sinuses filled with water inclined keeps water level below lungs, preventing drowning. Breathing becomes labored and subject panics. He panics. And as he's panicking, that trigger we've talked about in the Eye of Ra, that trigger, your inside your epiphysis and your epiphysis chamber inside your pineal is a suicide trigger, and that constantly there is a secretion of chemicals that are here to dissolve you completely as a person, completely obliterate you, to send you to the machine elves, as McKenna might say. To be completely obliterated, to die, is to have this trigger released, because all the DMT that's flowing out of your system through your pineal is now inhibited by chemicals. And that what's happening inside your body all the time is that this suicide trigger is waiting for you to take your thumb off. And that you would only take your thumb off when the situation is so dire that you think you're about to die. And because of that, by releasing the thumb, the DMT is able to render yourself in one final moment, which is this flash of light we see. It is to render your life before your eyes, which is an experience that has more conviction than flailing myself and torturing yourself, than even eating bread cooked in poo. That drowning is a higher form of that technology. And that baptism, performed on the water, was John's ancient technology of finding God. And that now we see a superficial form of that, the same way you see the Russian lady screaming about Donald Trump. We see that in our baptisms. We even symbolically cross our arms, knowing that we're about to die. And that baptism took several men. It took several men. Why? Because you were holding a human underwater. You were holding him underwater until he thought he was going to die. And that takes strength, and that draws a crowd. I would like for you to picture why they would leave the nice climate-controlled temple to come down to the Jordan River and go, what the hell is the crazy dude who eats bugs doing? There are hundreds of people there. Why are they there? And they were there because John was providing you with a near-death experience. And when you die, you're said to see and go for the light. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. John was the witness for those who wanted to seek the light, for those who wanted the experience. A near-death experience is a profound personal experience associated with death or impending death, with researchers claim share similar characteristics. When positive, such experiences may encompass a variety of sensations, including detachment from the body, feelings of levitation, total serenity, security, warmth, the experience of absolute dissolution, what is baptism, and the presence of a light. The presence of a light. And the exact same experience, when negative, offers anguish and distress. So the same experience can be good and bad, right? It can be a bad experience, or it can be a happy experience. Either way, the flesh is transcended. And around here, transcending the flesh equals conviction. We've never understood that, but it does. The truth is that Christ put an end to John's suffering by fulfilling his role as Messiah. And I want to tell you more about that right now, but my team, we have guys, this is going to be a nice series because today's just about John the Baptist. But I want you to take this trauma technology that we're talking about, and I want you to carry it with you next time when we talk about Christ. But before we do, we need to look at the solstice. It's very important. Keep in mind that the Christ was exercising the same martyr technology that we've just described. And that Christ was used to purge out, therefore, the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. And that the same people that were protecting the Old Testament were also protecting Christ. Even though we claim that this was a war between the Christians and the Romans, or even the Sadducees, but you're about to see that that's not actually the case. It's not. That part of venerating a martyr is to be supporting that martyr. And to get there, I just want to explain real quick that there's Arma Christi, the weapons of Christ. These are called the instruments of passion. They're objects associated with the passion of Jesus Christ in Christianity. Symbolism and art, they're seen as arms in the sense of heraldry. These are the weapons of Christ that he used to achieve his conquest over Satan. Of course, the most famous of these would be the crown of thorns. The very crown that he wore was preserved by the very people that are claiming to never believe in Christ. Why? Because they believe in the technology. That when you look at all the others, well, Jerome flailed himself, but that was it. Well, this other person, she was brothelled and had a sword through her throat, but that was it. The other, well, he was crucified, but then he was cut in half, but that was it. That Alma Christa was the ultimate mega martyr, the ultimate mega, the one who could not be topped because of his perfection. And that there are 26 heralded instruments of the passion. The cross of the penitent thief Dismas, a ladder, a sponge on a reed, a hammer, the angels, the cross of Christ itself, a cock who crowed in the morning, right? Star, pincers, ladder, spear, cross of the wicked thief Gestas, 2 hyssop plants growing from the ground. By the way, those hyssop plants are also used in amethyst. It's a dilator. The dilator, guys. The very plants that are below Christ are meant to dilate someone while they're having this ceremony. And there's more. The chalice, the torch, the lantern, the sword, the flagellum, the pillars of flagellation. Veronica's veil. Actual veil used to wipe his face as he walked. 30 pieces of silver. Probably what are dice that we used to gamble over his clothes, a reed scepter, a hand which struck Christ, a torch, pitcher of gall and vinegar. That these are venerated as the instruments, the Alma Christi of Christ. And why were they venerated? Because there are benefits to crucifixion, that there are three main benefactors of a crucifixion. That back then, what we'll call the church, we'll call that the church, the Judaic temple leaders benefited from the crucifixion of Christ. That the state benefited from the crucifixion of Christ. That Jesus himself benefited from the crucifixion of Christ. All three of these participated in this ritual voluntarily. All three of them. And I know that it's a lot to say that and then have to make you wait for Christ, but you'll see why when we get into this. You'll understand why. That, guys, your ascension, your alchemy is only going to come through vitriol. And that Christ was an alchemist, and that Christ sought his own perfection and aligned himself with the stars and was willing to do more than anyone else was to get it. That's why he was baptized by John. That's why after his experience with John, he wanted more. You're looking at a vessel that could take more. And so he did. Rome humanized the stars and called it religion. And this benefited everyone. Religio is a term meaning cultus deorum. Like, think of decorum. The proper performance of rites in veneration to the gods. Cicero was the first person to even use this word. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that religion was an invention that happened in 0 AD. It was the birth of religion. And the main purpose of that religion was to calm the fuck down with the victimhood Olympics. That it got so bad that people were not able to focus. No one felt pious anymore. Because literally during the day, people were flailing themselves in the street for attention to try and prove they had more conviction. And that an entire social law was formed. And that social law, mos maiorum, was Rome's attempt at a sweet spot between fanaticism and piety. And Rome never had an issue with anyone worshiping whatever god they wanted. They supported that. Rome wanted you to worship somebody. That was Rome's only requirement. And now that they had everyone worshiping somebody, they're like, but don't worship them that hard. Holy fuck, dude. Stop cooking your own poop, Ezekiel. That shit's not cool. That's what you were seeing. And that they needed a solution to this. And the solution fulfilled the prophecy of stars. That just like then, the religion that ran all things was older than Christ. It was older than Rome. It was older than the pyramids. That the sun itself is the living embodiment of John the Baptist and Jesus Christ. John the Baptist is said to be born 6 months before Christ. What you're looking at is the analema on the right. This is the path of the sun, taken every day at a certain time throughout the year. And at the very, very top of that is John the Baptist, the summer solstice. And the very bottom of Jesus Christ, the winter solstice. And that the sun crosses itself on its path from John to Jesus. Not only does it cross itself, but that sun goes underneath itself. It has to die. And that when it gets to John the Baptist, just like when it gets to Jesus Christ, it will spend 3 days, not moving. And for 3 days, people won't know if it's alive or dead. Excuse me. People won't know. And that the stars were not enough chutzpah. The stars itself did not have enough salaciousness to captivate people. And that it became necessary to embody those stars into something more tangible, more readable, more personable. To humanize, which is why I say Rome humanized the stars and called it religion. They had to. In fact, when you're looking at baptism and resurrection, you're just simply looking at the directions inside the cross. That the one lesser than he, the smaller of the analema, is the baptism of the Son of Man, and the larger analema at the bottom is the resurrection of the Son of Man. And that the analema itself is the cross. It's the living, eternal cross. And it's everywhere. It's some of the most important journeys that we make. And it's information that would take you lifetimes to even understand. It's living truth. It has its own resonance because it's so big. This truth of what the sun does is so big that the average person cannot go out into the sky and see it and understand this. It would take him more than a year, more than just the equipment necessary to photograph something precisely in the right spot or to even mark where it is. And to have that place available all year is itself a luxury. That the decoding of what actually happens in the sky is valuable information because it tells people when it's going to get warm again and when it's going to become cold again. And that is crucial for survival. And anyone who knew that information was closer to God because they offered more conviction for others to gather around. That conviction came from the power of the gnosis of what was physically going to happen next based on what's been happening for so long before. And the only way the people would accept this truth is embodied inside a person. And I believe in syncretism. I believe that these people embodied themselves naturally because they were following the scaffolding of the world. Most of the saints are telling you what was happening with the sun. Saint Jerome is reputed for having removed a thorn from the lion's paw while living as a hermit in the desert. And if you look here, you'll see that when the sun lowers itself, when Jesus' body comes off the cross, the nails are removed. The thorn is removed. And Leo, the constellation, is embodied in the story. The lion, Christ himself, has the thorns removed. And while living in the desert, watch this, while living in the desert, Jerome, who was fascinated with skulls, by the way, Jerome was fascinated with skulls, has to go underneath the bull, Notre, Aries and Taurus. It has to go underneath into Virgo. And what is the story of Jerome? But that he practiced mortifying his own body as he goes underneath the cross. There's the lion down there. And that while he was in the desert, he was tempted by virgins. So you have the lion, Leo, you have the death, the underworld, the skull, and you have the virgins, and you have the thorns, and all of them are depicted in St. Jerome. St. Jerome translated the Vulgate, Latin Bible. So the girl said to Herod, "Give me the head of John the Baptist on a big plate." Herod had John's head cut off in the prison. His head was brought in on a big plate and given to the girl. She then carried it to her mother. The head of John the Baptist was decapitated and sent to Virgo. It rose into Virgo. How was it decapitated? It crossed the ecliptic. The beheading and martyrdom of John the Baptist is remembered on August 29th. And the analema is crossed on August 29. That John the Baptist is showing you a story that's so important. It's one of the oldest stories in time. And the other side of that ecliptic, the crown of thorns. Believe it or not, on April 15th, tax day, that's when all of us are told to pay. We're told to pay Rome. And on that very same day, my friends, on that very same day, the fire of Notre Dame happened. And the roof, shaped like a cross, fell into the center. And despite the worst fire ever to exist, the crown of thorns was listed as the only relic to survive. And if you watch this whole psyop go down, you remember, if you were watching me, you remember I showed you the airlifted pictures of all the saints with their heads cut off in broad daylight. That the old gods were removed to make room for the new, and that these were done by the Pharisees and the Sadducees who don't like it if you don't worship the way they want you to worship. The Son of Man is the Son, man. Prometheus 2:3. It's a wise squirrel. It's a very wise squirrel. This story is one of many. And I don't think it's wrong. Matthew is man, Aquarius. Mark is the lion, Leo. Luke is the bull, Taurus. John is the eagle, Scorpio. That these signs have been embedded in religion since day one. Actually, since the Vulgate. But it doesn't mean that they're not true. Because a lazy mind will comprehend truth once and stop. But we're in a world of syncretism. We're in a world where 6 truths can fit like layer cake. And that unless you have those 6 truths, you're never going to be able to find more conviction because you stopped. You stopped on one. And that's what stops most people from looking into the truth of this. That this is astrotheology, my friends. The Bible is about astrotheology. And that the entire thing has been a battle of astronomy versus astrology. And we'll be getting into that in this series. Can't wait to download all this to you. I've been working on this all week. That's why I was gone all week. There is so much more. And I want to remind you that Ezekiel himself said, how do I do it? Their faces looked like this. Each of the four had the face of a human being, and on the right side of each had the face of a lion, and on the left the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. And that the Ophanin, the Hebrew word Ophanin, was probably the zodiac. It was the wheel inside a wheel, as Ezekiel called it. And then when he's showing you the four faces, he's looking up in the heavens and seeing the four houses: Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo. The cross of the sky. The living cross of the sky. This is Leonardo da Vinci's final painting. And it's John the Baptist, and he's looking right at you, and he's telling you about the Son, the solo man. The solo man was baptized and resurrected on heaven's cross for eternity. And that truth is embedded in every Abrahamic belief. This is not just in the Bible. This is in the Quran, as you're about to see. This is in the Talmud. This is spoken in the Talmud. And as you're about to see, so much has been hidden from us in the Exodus of Egypt. So stick with me. Watch more. I hope you like this one. And, yeah. Thanks for being here. Let's close this puppy out. Where's the outro?